The Arc Louisiana was founded by Miss Lillian Walker in 1953 and became incorporated in 1954. Ms. Walker is a parent of a child with a disability who was looking for something more for her child. The Arc of Louisiana is the oldest and the largest advocacy organization of and for people with developmental disabilities in Louisiana. We're devoted to promoting and improving supports and services across the state for individuals and families. Currently, we have a little over 20 local chapters of the Arc across the state who provide these services. The Arc has a rich history spanning over 65 years of service in the local, state, and national chapters of the Arc.
In the beginning, the Arc really came about as a result of parents coming together, parents who had children with intellectual and developmental disabilities back in the early 50s. Many of at the time, there weren't very many options, if any, at all in the local communities. And most physicians, when a baby was born with a disability, the almost universal recommendation was that the family place their son or daughter in a facility, an institution at the time, and pretty much leave them there and go visit, to make them comfortable, but to not expect that they would ever have an opportunity to live at home and be part of the family and part of the community.
The fact that there simply weren't any services. If you were to talk to some of the families that were around during those days, they had a choice of keeping their child at home with no services or institutionalizing.
That's not what they wanted for their sons or daughter. They wanted something better. They wanted something different for their children. And it started around coffee tables, people talking, church groups, wherever they could get together and talk about what the options were. They tried to come up with alternatives of what they could do for their sons and daughters.
Those that kept their sons and daughters at home found themselves the primary caregiver with little or no support at all. So I think they began to have that realization that they needed assistance.
They did not believe the experts of the day, that their children were unable to learn anything. They knew their children could learn and be part of the family, an important part of the family, and they weren't willing to give them up. So they kind of band together in little co-ops to see if they would have almost like play dates and friends, and that their children would have a learning environment, because the schools just summarily turned them down, if you can believe it. But that was back in the 50s, and just, sorry, not your kid. And so those parents got together to have something for their children, and it evolved to the Arc.
What they would do would be to use the Sunday school classrooms of local churches. So they found a local church that wasn't using their Sunday school classes from Monday through Friday, and then they would go in and they would move all that furniture out, move theirs in, and pretty much did it themselves as volunteers. No formal education. There really wasn't much formal education to be had. They just helped one another.
They had no funding sources or anything else. They got their kids together. The moms took turns taking care. The dads were the board, so to speak, and parents just, they cooked the meals, they took care of the kids, they did it all themselves.
They really formed the first strong advocacy movement for children and adults with disabilities, with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They went and sat on the steps of the school board office. They went into the school board meetings. They went to their city government. They went to the parish government. In other parts of the country, the county government. They went to the state government, and they pretty much demanded that their children be afforded the same rights that other children were provided in the community. Parents became the strong advocates that they are and remain today.
They passed Public Law 94-142, which was enormous in that it said, essentially, federal law, all children are entitled to a free and appropriate public education. That was a paradigm shift beyond any that, you can hardly imagine. Because before that, the children were not considered eligible for public school.
So many chapters of the Arc changed gears, shifted gears to start providing other kinds of services and filling other needs, as the funds at the state level and local level from United Way or local government were then made available to do other things. And that's when really the expansion of early intervention services took place, was after the advent of 94-142. Babies birth to 3 There have been little bits and pieces of it across the country, but not until 94-142 came about and freed up some resources were chapters of the Arc able to expand in providing services to babies. Same is true, came along with community homes and respite services. Those all were made possible because 94-142 was put in place and required the local educational authority agency to provide that education to kids, and that gave the Arc, chapters of the Arc, an opportunity to go in different directions.
Then we had to have companion legislation on the state level to make it happen. Louisiana wasn't exactly known as a state that would jump to do what the feds said. So it was very important that we band together to have companion legislation for a free and appropriate education for all children in the state. And then, of course, the American with Disabilities Act was also huge landmark legislation, and the Arc was a great leader in that movement, too.
And throughout the decades, the Arc has been at the forefront, both at the state level and the national level, of introducing and providing the impetus for legislation to move forward through the process, oftentimes over the course of several years to get something in place. So that's true at the state level and the national level. Very many of the ideas that have become legislation have been formulated by chapters of the Arc, by that partnership of families, self-advocates, and professionals and community leaders coming together and seeing a need and helping to identify ways legislatively to make that happen. And most recently at the federal level, the ABLE Act, Affording a Better Life for People. That act began as an initiative of the Arc, and now federal law and it's state law that those opportunities for savings for the future are available across the country.
The whole movement is a civil rights movement. It's about civil rights for people with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities. It's been a struggle from the get-go to get an education, for instance, to get jobs, to get to live in the community and out of institutions, and all the things that go along with funding that. There was a threat to Medicaid, the primary funder of today's services, and it's the Arc at a national level and a state level and local levels taking up that fight to preserve that source of funding that allows people to stay home, to work, to contribute, to be a part of their community.
The Arc has an amazing history of progressive growth for providing skilled services and supports for individuals with unique and special needs, and that will continue.
And what we try to do is provide an avenue for families and the individuals that we serve to have a place to learn job skills so that they can go out and work independently in the community. And if there are any other services that they need, housing, personal care, those sorts of things, the Arcs are generally in the forefront of all new ways of doing things and making people that we serve very successful.
One thing that sets us apart from other advocacy organizations is our commitment to self-advocacy. In the mid-90s, the Arc developed and supported the First People First chapter in Louisiana. Over the past 23 years, People First advocated for personal advocacy and systems change. Self-advocates are the heart of our organization, and we would not be what we are today without them.
First, the objective is to implement change. In order to implement change, you have to be aware that there are issues. In order to be aware, you've got to have somebody to listen to you. And that's kind of what we do here for the People First program. We voice what's going on. We voice challenges. And then in return, we talk about what we can do. What action can we take to implement a difference in the lives of people with disabilities?
The Arc is an organization like no other with a unique history. The accomplishments we achieved over the past 65 years that support individuals with disabilities and their families were made possible because of the self-advocates, families, local chapters, and volunteers who help move our mission forward and help guide the work of the ARC every day. We have always been a place for individuals with disabilities and their families to turn to for advocacy, services, and supports. We'll continue to improve the lives of individuals with disabilities through our public policy and advocacy work.